I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Hey guys, if you like what I'm doing, click the Amazon banner at the top of the homepage on FascinationStreetPod.com and do all of your shopping through Amazon. Once you click on it and it takes you to Amazon, you can bookmark it or add it to your favorites and you won't have to go to my site each time. It helps me keep the show going, and again, thanks for listening. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Lanie H. Lanie hosts the True Crime Fan Club podcast, the Crimes of Passion podcast, and the It's Haunted What Now podcast. She also created the Texas Podcast Union, which is a bunch of like-minded individuals in Texas who get together and help each other out in various ways, and sometimes have meetups and just hang out. In this episode, we talk about what got Lanie into podcasting. She talks about all of her various podcasts and why she couldn't stop at just one. She does give a few tips on how to manage time as far as podcasts go, since it takes so much time. And she talks a little bit about her budding voiceover career and how she got started in that. So enjoy, folks. This is my conversation with Lanie H. from the True Crime Fan Club podcast.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Lanie from True Crime Fan Club podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay, I guess. Thank you for asking.
No problem.
So, Lanie, I generally like to ask people where they were born and raised, but first I want to heartily thank you for, buying some food when we all met up one time a couple months ago.
No problem. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And it was nice to actually meet you in person. That was pretty cool.
Absolutely. It was the same.
Sweet. Well, you're welcome because I'm awesome. So, Lanie, where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Wiley, Texas, and I was raised...
That's not a real place.
It is. Like Wiley Coyote kind of thing. No, I'm just kidding. Wiley, Texas, it's just a little suburb outside of Dallas, maybe 30 minutes outside of Dallas. And then I was raised in Plano, Texas, so about 20 minutes outside of Dallas.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go to college?
I did. I went to the University of Texas in San Antonio, and I got my master's degree at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio.
Sweet. That is a nice school.
I know. I love that school. And double birds, right? So go Runners and then whatever the cardinal one is.
Usually when somebody utters the phrase double birds at me, it's because they just gave me two fingers.
Two fingers, yeah.
So what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think at first I wanted to be a singer. That was my biggest thing. But then I quickly realized, thanks to my aunt, who was like, you can't sing at all, that was not a dream of mine.
What a sweetheart.
I know. R.I.P.
Oh, snap.
But I think I eventually just wanted to be a lawyer. I thought it was so cool because I used to watch like Rescue 911, and my grandma and I kind of watched Unsolved Mysteries and things like that. So I really kind of delved into true crime kind of at an early age. So I always wanted to be the person that helped put bad people away, I would say.
So is that what you do now? Do you put bad people away?
No, I don't. I currently work in human resources as an employee relations analyst. So I kind of help people out of the company sometimes, but I also coach and counsel them to hopefully retain them, because that's always our goal. But yeah, I love HR. It's kind of a mold of everything I've wanted to do, which is, being face to face with people and coaching them through certain situations, but then also kind of holding them accountable, learning different policies and things like that. So I find I love it a lot.
Well done. So I know that you said that you wanted to, stop bad guys and stuff. Is that what got you into true crime?
No, it's actually thanks to my grandma and to my mom. My mom grew up listening to my grandma read her like detective novels and things like that. But my grandma got really scared reading them, so she stopped. But my mom was always really fascinated by it, and she kind of allowed me to read books I probably shouldn't have read when I was like 12 or 13. But I had no idea that the people that I was reading about at the time were real. And I remember going to her being like, wow, this is a crazy book. I wonder who the author is because I want to find more stories about this family. And she's like, oh, you won't. This is it. Like, this is true. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, no, these people, they're real. And I couldn't wrap my brain around that. I was like, how could somebody like this exist? And I think the first book I read was House of Secrets by Lowell Caulfield. It was about Eddie Lee Sexton, who was a notorious like family abuser and annihilator kind of. And I was kind of really fascinated by the psychology of everything. And I remember spending the majority of my high school time, especially when I was in speech and debate and we had some like downtime, reading Crime Library online. We found a way to kind of hack through the privacy filters or whatever filters they have in high school or in the school district. And I was reading Crime Library like all the time, just like learning about all these, different killers and different crimes and things like that.
Maybe you should have been a hacker.
Yeah, no, I left that to my friends. They're the ones who told me how to do it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Hey, they're the ones who told me to jump off a bridge. When did you first hear about podcasting? Like, when did you first find out what podcasting was?
So I heard about it maybe 3.5 or 4 years ago. I started listening to NPR and I found out about Snap Judgment. And I kept hearing Glenn Washington say, if you want to listen to more episodes of Snap Judgment, get to Apple Podcasts or iTunes at the time. And I was like, what the heck is a podcast? And so I had an iPhone and I saw the podcast app and I was like, oh, okay. And then I found Snap Judgment and I was like, oh, this is awesome. My favorite show is on here all the time. I can listen to it whenever I want to and I don't have to miss it. If I miss it, no big deal. And then I started wondering, oh, maybe they have true crime. And at the time when I first, started looking for true crime podcasts, it was only like a handful. I think it was Generation Y and The Vanished and then Once Upon a Crime. Those were really the only ones that I had seen that were really big at the time. And I kind of just delved in head first and was like, this is amazing. And then I started, messaging the hosts to cover cases and quickly realized how bogged down they were with case suggestions and decided I was like, hey, I just should do this on my own if I want to do it so badly. If I want to hear a story so badly, I should just do it.
And so you did it.
And then I did. Yeah.
So how long after you were listening to podcasts before you,
about a year.
Really? Before you worked up the courage or whatever to just do it?
Yeah. As soon as I listened to Snap Judgment, found out about podcast, I was like, oh, wow, there's this medium that I could kind of create in. And I was telling my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, that I really had this idea for this show. And it wasn't even a true crime show. It was my second show that is no longer in production. It's called We're All Just Pretending. It's probably still out there somewhere in the ether until the hosting dies or whatever. But it was a mix between Post Secret and Dear Abby. So I had this idea that people would like write in, said, questions and I could answer them, or I could reveal their secrets and things like that. But I realized I really didn't have the audience for that and that I didn't have the clout, I would say, to start something like that, to build an audience that would trust me enough to give me that content, I guess. So I was like, okay, what's another thing I'm passionate about? Oh, well, true crime. Okay, so then I came up with a topic and I started, ruminating about the name and what I wanted to do with it and how I wanted to present it, what the idea was. Like I spent a lot of time, like maybe 8 months or so, really trying to figure out how I was going to build the show and what I was going to do. And I created my first episode, drafted it and everything, thought about equipment and things like that. A lot of the equipment I had was really kind of thanks to my brother. Like, he's an audio junkie, so he gave me my first Zoom and kind of helped me with some things here and there. It wasn't the best quality of audio because I had no idea what I was doing, but I would say it was 8 months after or so that I came up with the idea, and I set a deadline for myself. And I was like, in October of, 2016, I kind of set the deadline there that I was going to publish my show, and I did.
At the time, I'm sorry, you said he was your boyfriend at the time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what was his reaction? Like, how was the reception for that? Was he like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, for the first one, he was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And then, I kind of went through the whole thing of like, I don't have the audience for it. And he was like, yeah. And then I told him about true crime. He was like, oh my God, yeah, you would be great at that, because I don't know anybody else who, and I think that's how every person who, really is an aficionado, I would say, or delves into true crime has somebody in their life that says that, like, I don't know anybody else who likes true crime as much as you do. That's kind of what he told me, and was like, yeah, you should do it. Like, I think it would be something that you would love. And at the time, I was in a really, really stressful place with my job. I had spent so much, of my energy just focused on my career and where I would go with it and what I wanted to do with it. And my boss finally was just like, you can't find, your happiness in your job, because then you will never be happy, because you'll always be wanting more and more, And so she was like, you need to find something outside of your job that gives you fulfillment. And that's kind of where that all kind of started. So it was like two things coming together that really helped me push myself into getting into podcasting.
Now, I know that a beginning podcaster, it's hard to find an audience.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find that part of the whole thing?
I really spent a lot of time networking and truly building relationships with other shows. I credit Marissa from The Vanished a lot for kind of helping me out in the beginning. She was really, really helpful with answering my technical questions, with giving me ideas for mics and things like that. And, just like literally answering any question under the sun for me. And now that I'm actually her friend, I see how busy she is and how busy she was then. And I just can't believe that she took the time to really mentor me in that way. But that's what I did. I started kind of shouting out shows on my podcast that I like to listen to. And I would, start tweeting on Twitter, on true crime, things like that. Like, I would just involve myself. So I spent a lot of time kind of marketing myself on Twitter, and at the time, not on Instagram, but on Facebook, and kind of joining true crime communities and really starting to build relationships before I promoted my content. I think the mistake I see with a lot of new shows is that they go and promote their content. Like, I get so many emails asking for promo swaps and things like that. And they're like, hey, I love your show. But I think what people fail to understand is that a lot of the older true crime shows talk to each other and things like that, and are like, hey, did you get a message from this person? And it's literally just a copy and paste of the previous message, which takes away the personal aspect of it. Because my goal is to always help build up another content creator, always. But if I feel you're being disingenuous, then I really don't want to spend that time helping you, because if you're just trying to use me to kind of like step on my shoulders and get my audience, then I don't really feel that you're trying to build a community. I feel like you're just trying to market yourself and that's it. But I have spent a lot of time working with other newer podcasters and kind of helping them with that and saying like, yeah, I'm happy to play your promo, and, establishing those relationships with them. But I think it's really easy to tell like who's in it for just trying to like build off your audience and your work versus who wants to really try and build a community with you.
That makes 100% sense. I think being genuine is probably maybe the biggest factor in trying to build an audience and develop relationships with, complete strangers.
Yeah.
So well done on you, lady.
Thank you.
So what was the name of your very first podcast?
Well, True Crime Fan Club is my first podcast.
Never heard of it. Now,
so check it out.
Totally kidding. How many episodes of that have you done?
100 or something. I don't keep up with episodes. I think I'm really bad at that. There's, like Steven from Trace Evidence. He knows like when his 100th episode is about to drop, and he'll like post about it and things like that. I'm just not that person. I can't do it. I don't know. I'm sure it's in the hundreds, I think, or hitting 100. I don't know. Honestly, it's over 50, I would say. Yes.
And your second one was called?
Yeah, so my second one was We're All Just Pretending, which is, like I said, no longer in production.
And why did that stop?
For good reasons. I started it, I think, maybe a year and a half after I started True Crime Fan Club. And I brought on Haley from Murder Road Trip, which is no longer in production, but she's a full-time researcher now. Charlie from Crime Lines and Josh from True Crime BS. And they all kind of brought in like different perspectives. Like Charlie dealt with like family and relationships. Josh gave drunk advice and Haley gave bad advice and I gave, general advice. But we all became really, really busy because we've all become successful in different ways. So we just didn't have the time to do it anymore. And we tabled it and it was fun. And it was kind of like a nice little pet project that I had. It was something that I was really passionate about, then I was happy that I got to do. But we had to stop it because we all got too busy for it.
That's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
So I think I heard you had a third podcast?
I technically have 4 podcasts, 3 are in production. So the third show that I started, a few months ago, I want to say, or maybe late last year, is called It's Haunted, What Now? And it delves into like paranormal stories about haunted objects that listeners submit and things like that. And it is one of my favorite shows to do. It's so much fun. I love paranormal stuff too. So, which kind of ties into the whole like unsolved mysteries thing where you get a little bit of true crime, but then you also get some paranormal stuff. That's why I created It's Haunted, to kind of satisfy that paranormal need that I had.
Does it?
It does. I love it. It's so much fun and it's super creepy to get some of these stories and just like, oh my God, these are, I recorded in my studio by myself, and I'm in my ISOVOX, which is really isolated and it blocks me in and I can't see anything around me. So I'll sometimes hear like little sounds here and there. I'm like, oh my God, okay, just keep reading. It's not that bad. Don't worry. So I have to like talk myself into like, oh no, it's fine. You're just being crazy. Because I'm a huge believer in the paranormal, but I like to just let people's stories kind of stand on their own. And so it's kind of pretty hilarious to me to be scared about my own content.
That is hilarious. Well, how do you find time for all of these podcasts?
I don't know. It was really important for me early on to have balance. And so for True Crime Fan Club, I brought on one of my really good friends, Brittany, who would help me with researching and stuff. When I think the show became more popular, I think when I first started, of course, I did everything, just on my own, research writing, editing, all that fun stuff. But I think once the show became successful, what I consider to be successful, I wanted to kind of outsource some of that stuff so that I could focus on not being overwhelmed, because I see a lot of people pod fade after maybe a year of doing their podcast because they don't realize like how much work goes into it. And I'm fortunate enough that I have a really great team of people willing to help me and willing to work with me. Of course, they're compensated for their time. But when I first started, Brittany and I kind of just did everything together in regards to researching and writing, and she would just check my content because she's an excellent writer. But surprisingly, she actually doesn't like writing, even though she's really good at it. She loves researching. So I brought her on kind of as the content editor. I do my best to outsource, but then I also kind of put people out there so that they know, like, here's my team, this is what they do. And if you want to use them, feel free to. So like my producer and my audio engineer, they get clients and things like that from other podcasters, which I think is good. It helps build a community of trusted, professionals that people know do a good job. I mean, you can hear it in my show, you can hear it in other people's shows, that you get quality content. And that's what I think listeners care about, is that, your audio is good, your content's good, and they don't really care about the rest in terms of, what kind of perks they get. As long as they get the good content, that's really what they're there for.
I think that you are correct. I noticed, like, when I first started, I didn't have a brother who was an audio engineer or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I found that my audio quality, let's be generous and say that it was somewhat lacking.
Oh, yeah, same here. I cringe.
Yeah, it's so funny now when people are listening to my show and then they go back and listen to one of my first shows, they'll hit me up and be like, bro, what the fuck?
You're like, such a difference. I know. I always tell people, I'm like, just don't start from the beginning. Start with a recent episode. And then you can appreciate like where this person came from, because you notice that a lot of like, especially the negative reviews people get are from their earlier episodes. And I'll see one pop up here and there where it's like, the audio, I can't hear this, or blah, 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 this is that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could respond and be like, why did you listen to the very first episode? You see that I have like 70 something episodes or whatever, how many, like, why wouldn't you start from the most current episode? I don't get that.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
Now, do you go back and make any adjustments to your previous episodes?
No.
Why not?
I don't have time to do that.
Really? Is that why?
Yeah, I really don't. I think especially for maybe my first 10 episodes, I don't even have the original audio. So I wouldn't be able to even fix it really if I wanted to. I think I've given stuff to my producer before and he's tried, but it hasn't made much of a difference. So I'm just like, you know what? Deal with it. I'm fine with it. It's not affecting me in a way that I'm getting bad reviews every single day because of it or anything like that. I think if I was, I would be more inclined to do so. But I think that podcast listeners are smart enough to know that you probably have improved and they give your show a chance if they like your content. I think the audio quality comes second to your content.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because people will write in or whatever and complain about the audio, but nobody's ever complained about the content.
Right.
And those people keep listening. Even the ones who complain about the audio,
yeah,
they don't stop listening because they know that, that's the old stuff and the new stuff doesn't sound like that. So,
yeah.
Now, in October of last year, 2018, for those listening in the future, you were featured in the Houston Chronicle in an article about women in true crime. How did that come about?
I think that actually happened because Shay from All Crime No Cattle kind of connected me with the reporter. It actually started in San Antonio. So it was the San Antonio Express News, the reporter there who wanted to discuss women in true crime and why women are so fascinated and drawn to true crime. So Shay's really responsible for getting that connect. He connected them with a lot of local Texas podcasters who are women, which was really kind of him to do.
I'll say that's super kind of him to do.
Yep.
And it was nice to get to meet him in person at that same event. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, they're great.
So the Express News reached out, and then did they also do an article, and then Houston did an article, or how?
Well, what I found out is that they can buy stories, I guess, or share stories. It was written by the same guy, so I think it shows the same author from the article. They just published it there, too.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was surprising to see Houston because I think one of my sorority sisters texted me and was like, "You're in the newspaper." And I was like, "What?" And then they sent me a picture of myself and I was like, "Oh, cool." And so I have that one. I think I have the Houston Chronicle one on my fridge.
Aww.
Yeah, like it's me.
Like a drawing from when you were in 4th grade.
Except it's professional.
So tell me about Crimes of Passion.
Yeah, so that is a Spotify/Cutler Media production. I was brought on in February of this year to launch the show, to host it, and it's been super fun. It's a really different type of true crime show, I would say. I think Parcast has a really different style on how they do their stories and how they represent themselves to listeners. I kind of liken it to like a Lifetime movie network type of show where you get the dramatics and you get like, the theatrics of it, but you also get the story. So there's not really anything missing from it, but you get a little bit more of the storyline behind it. Like it could easily be made into a show, I would say.
And how did you get hooked up? Well, first, what the heck is Parcast?
They're a podcast network. So they produce a lot of different type of shows. They have a lot of true crime shows. They have some, mystery shows, political shows, scandal shows, things like that. I mean, they're huge. And I partnered with them because I had been partnering with them for ad drops and things like that. When they had new episodes or new shows that were being developed, released, then we would work together so that I could let my audience know about them. And it kind of just really happened organically. It was something I started listening to a podcast show called Female Criminals. And the host on there, Vanessa Richardson, she's a really talented voiceover actress. And I just fell in love with her voice. And I was like, oh my God, her voice is so amazing. She's so great. And I had this dream of like, oh man, I wish I could do this someday. Like it would be cool to host for a podcast and really just be the host of the show and things like that. And it kind of came to fruition, and it was really scary how it happened, where I was just like, wow, this is kind of my dream come true. This is weird. I put it out into the ether and it happened, and that's never happened to me before. So I feel really fortunate and really lucky to be able to work with them, because they're honestly a really good team and company to work for. I've had really good experiences with them.
Kick ass. What did those articles and that little bit of, I guess, media spotlight and attention, what did that do for your numbers? Obviously not specifics, just, generalities.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it changed anything. Sometimes with things like that, you'll see, spikes and things, but then you'll just go and level out again. So I think what happens with things like that is you'll get new listeners, and then they either decide like, oh yeah, I like it, or oh no, I don't like it. And then they move on. So I think I probably experienced a spike, but I've leveled out since then. My numbers have increased, but I don't know that I would attribute it to the articles or anything like that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So as far as you know, you didn't notice a bump or anything?
No, nothing significant.
Like you couldn't really tell?
No. Mm-mm.
Do you think that's weird?
No, I don't think so. I don't know that it's really strange. A lot of people don't know what a podcast is still, even though like everybody and their mom has one now. But yeah, I don't find it strange. I think it's a really niche media that it's still kind of expanding, and it's still kind of an unknown type of entertainment platform. So I think a lot of people are barely, kind of grasping what it is. I mean, I remember when I went to the first Crime Con, and they had Podcasters Row, where they were featuring like true crime podcasts and things like that. And we had people walking up to us like, what are you here for? What's a podcast? I don't know what that is. And you're just like, oh, okay. I thought you guys listened to podcasts. So you're literally standing there like teaching somebody how to sign up on iTunes or sign up on their Android device and how to subscribe to podcasts and listen to podcasts, and helping them find one that's like what they like to do or what they like to listen to. So if they like more serious shows, you could have a, handful of recommendations there. If they like funnier shows, with a little bit of comedy, then you can have some recommendations there. So it was really interesting to see that. So I'm not surprised that a newspaper didn't lead to a bunch of spikes.
I guess, even last year, the only people really reading newspapers are super old people who don't know what a podcast is.
Right. I guess so. I don't know. I don't know anybody that reads a newspaper anymore.
See?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So you also were, I guess, listed as a podcast to listen to by Still Feel 21.
Cool.
Oh, is this news to you?
I didn't know about that. No, I don't know.
Well, you're welcome.
Yay.
I don't even know when that was, and I really don't know what that is. So,
yeah.
Do you know what that is?
Thanks to whoever that is. No, I don't know.
Well, how lucky are you?
I feel fortunate and blessed. I don't know anything about it.
Well, you should. So, what is Our Americana, and who is Israel Keys?
Oh, okay. So Our Americana is another podcast network. It's an indie podcast network by Josh Hallmark, who hosts a billion different shows, more than me. He hosts Our Americana, the podcast, True Crime BS, and Playlist Podcast. And I think that's it for now. But yeah, he's the creator of that. And so Israel Keys is a really famous serial killer. And he's famous because multiple reasons, obviously, but he was really organized and prepared. Josh is so much better at describing Keys. I was seriously not even interested in Israel Keys like at all. When the whole thing happened, I was like, boring or whatever. But after listening to Josh's podcast, I was like, oh man, this guy is like really crazy. So he basically like buried kill kits all over the US, like wherever he was, he had a kill kit ready. So he didn't ever have to travel with one. He knew where the cache was, and he would go dig it up, and then he would be able to rape and murder whoever, he wanted. And the majority of the people that he murdered are unknown. He's really famous because during one of the FBI interviews, he said something like, I don't want this, to be publicized, and I don't want people, to be into the true crime bullshit or whatever. So that catchphrase is kind of what launched him into the periphery of so many people, because it was kind of funny that this serial killer is worried about being a part of the true crime community when it was like, duh, you killed people. Of course you are.
That's weird. How did you get involved in that project?
I am really, really good friends with Josh. I'm kind of really in awe of his talent and the way that he can tell a story. And he was needing kind of some help delving into the true crime world about how, to best bring his show out and things like that. So I really kind of just gave him some pointers and some insight and, kind of help with some of his content questions that he had. I did not help at all with developing his show or content or anything like that. He likes to be humble and, thank a bunch of people for doing things. And there were people who helped him, with the FBI files and reading through all of those and making notes and everything like that. I think those people for sure deserve the credit. I think I deserve none of the credit because I was just being a friend, helping him out and kind of answering his questions about the true crime genre and that type of side of podcasting, because it's very different than other communities, I would say,
I agree. Now, I'm not in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that's the reason that I'm not as wildly successful as some of you other people.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Do you really?
I do. It kind of strikes a nerve with me a little bit. Not when you say it, but there are certain people who do say it as a way of saying the only reason that you're successful is because you're doing a true crime show. And I don't think that that's true, because there are a billion people doing true crime shows and none of them have, reached a certain number of success or, will experience the success that I have or, that other bigger shows have. I probably will never experience the success of, Gen Y or The Vanished or anything like that. And I don't think that it's realistic to expect that. I think that it just truly depends on the timing. It depends on the content. Josh is really lucky because he has a really great way of telling a story. He has content that people want to hear and want to know about, because nobody's truly delved into Israel Keys before the way he has. And I think it's sometimes just a matter of luck too. You see shows that start out and they explode because their hosts are great, their content's great, the audio is awesome, things like that. But I see other shows and I just think that because of how new, even though it's been around forever, like podcasting, I think because of how new the notoriety is, I think it's going to take some time to build other genres and other type of niches in the content and things like that. Even in the paranormal side of the community, it's still fairly new. And my show being new, I attribute the success to the fact that I was able to kind of showcase it on my true crime platform and say, hey, here's another show. If you want to hear from me, blah, 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 then you can go and do that. So I was fortunate in the sense that I had a show to piggyback off of. I don't know that my show would have reached as many people as it did if I didn't already have, this. So in my paranormal show is doing well. It's nowhere near where, my true crime show is, but it's grown and I'm proud of it. I think anybody should be proud of it. As long as there are people listening, just create your content and be happy with it.
I agree. And I hope that you really weren't offended by what I said.
No. I just think it's important to note that, because I think there are people who use that against us. And I just don't, it really does make it look like it's a petty kind of jealousy thing, when I think it's just a frustration thing that's not coming off correctly. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, I just kind of like to set that kind of record straight on that it's not just because we're in true crime that we're successful. It's because that's a really popular genre just in general in the world, right? Like, think of how many things I don't even know when the explosion happened, because it feels like for me, it's always been around. But, you see such a investigation, discovery, oxygen, doing all these crazy things, and true crime just becoming huge.
Serial, the podcast, was spoofed on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, so I think it was Serial that launched everything. We just haven't had anything else kind of launch things like that for other genres,
That's right. And that was the first introduction to even the word podcast for a large segment of America who had no idea what the fuck that sketch was even about. And then they looked it up and, saw all the reactions from everybody going, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing it or whatever. So I think that helped a lot.
I agree.
So you've mentioned San Antonio having an impact in different parts of your life. I know you don't live in San Antonio. Where do you
I
live?
live in Dallas. I moved back here in 2012. I lived in San Antonio from 2006 to 2012. So yeah, I love San Antonio. It's like my second home. It's actually kind of where I feel like I grew as an adult and really became like independent and on my own. And so it holds like just a really special place in my heart because I just love that town.
Me too. So I know that you have 3 podcasts that are ongoing and one that's in the history books. How often does TCFC
It comes
come
out twice a month. And It's Haunted comes out twice a month. And Parcast, or The Crimes of Passion, comes out weekly.
Okay, so you're putting out 8 episodes a month. Do you
I
have
do not.
kids? Okay, so that's why you're able to do
Yeah,
that.
and you know, I did this. I really wanted to get into podcasting and really wanted it to be successful because if me and my husband decide, you know, to start a family and things, I wanted to have something outside of my children to be able to focus on because, you know, I planned, I guess, to want to stay home and do all these things. And now that I've kind of delved into voice acting and I'm starting to build that career, it really seems like a viable option for me. And I think that's also why I started to get help so I could have, you know, like producers. So I don't, you know, edit my shows anymore, like any of my shows. I don't do any of that because that takes up a lot of time.
You don't have to tell
Yeah,
me, sister.
so much time. And I do not miss editing at all. It's probably one of my least favorite things to do because I'm so obsessive with it. So handing it off to somebody else that can do it probably, I could probably do it fast now that I have the experience of doing it. But I remember when I first started, oh my God, I'd be like spending a whole day editing an episode, you know, like a 30-minute episode. And now I could probably do it like maybe in 2 or 3 hours. But yeah, I don't miss any of that. So I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that now. And so I've kind of started being able to release that responsibility where I really just can focus on recording and writing, and that's it.
Just for everybody listening who might not be familiar, me personally, I have put out, you know, by the time this airs, somewhere around 175
Whoa.
episodes. Thank you. Now, each episode, you know, they range, you know, 30 minutes to, I don't know, like an hour and 6 minutes or something like that. But try to average somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes per finished, completed episode. And for everybody listening, just the editing piece for a 1-hour episode takes me, now that I've been doing it and I feel fairly competent, it still takes me 6 hours to edit a 1-hour episode.
Yeah.
So how hard was it for you to be able to let that piece go, to let somebody
It was
else
really
do it?
hard. Thankfully, I was able to hand it over to a friend that I trust. So Haley's husband, his name is Ches. Like, he's a musician and all that stuff. He has a band. And so he was like, yeah, I'll edit. And I was like, okay, I'll hand this over to you. And Nico, who originally was producing just music for me, like I wanted to have, you know, a custom intro and outro and things like that whenever I was starting, and just kind of have, especially for my paranormal show, I wanted, you know, like creepy music in the background to kind of help elevate the mood. And he was like, you know, I also do this. And I was like, this is amazing. So I handed over TCFC's editing to Nico. And I handed over the paranormal editing to Ches, and both of them have been phenomenal and saved my life on dozens of occasions because I'm incredibly disorganized. And so I often send them audio. I'm like, hey, I need this by 2 days from now. Can you knock this out for me? And they do, and they do a great job. So I am happy to be working with them and to always recommend them to people, but they always know that I come first. So I'm like, I don't care who you're working with. I don't care what you're working on. You're working with me. Okay.
So who edits Crimes of
That's
Passion?
all Spotify podcast and them. They do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So they have a team of engineers. So really all I do is kind of just get on the mic and host.
So you have managed to, even though you're spinning 3 plates, you have managed to completely get rid of editing at all.
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
do any?
No.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It takes up way too much time.
Yeah, with all that free time, when are you going to start up your
Oh my
next
gosh, I always
podcast?
have ideas, but I think I just need to stop. I have like so many in production that in my brain that I'm like, oh, this would be good to do this. And I'm like, God, I would wait for an audience for that, you know? I think that I'm really just going to focus on building the shows that I have and exploring, you know, my voiceover opportunities, which have been great. You know, like I'm doing an audiobook soon and hopefully some other voiceover things that I can't talk about yet. But yeah, I'm just wanting to kind of expand in that career. But the tough part, I think, is that I love my full-time job so much that it's so hard to make that leap. And I don't think that I will until I become like super set. Like, I think once I make as much money as I make at my full-time job, I'd quit.
Hey, streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors. Let's get back into it.
I'm fortunate that I get to work from home, so I get to, you know, kind of manage my time to where I can kind of do all things at once, which is really, really nice. But it takes a lot. Like I'm always busy, you know, because when people are like, where do you have the time? I'm like, I have no idea. Even with outsourcing some of this stuff, it still takes up, you know, so much of my time to get the episodes ready and to manage the social media. Because I think a lot of people don't realize, like when I hear podcasters say, I'm really bad at social media, I'm like, that's
a death
what
knell.
you're missing. You got to be good at it. You got to get on Twitter. You got to get on Instagram. You got to get on Facebook. You got to constantly be interacting with people, starting conversations, things like that. Like I run probably 5, maybe 4 Twitter things, 3 Instagrams, and 2 Facebook pages, you know, and I'm always on them, like posting something in my group, doing this, doing that. Social media is one thing I will never turn over to somebody else because I've seen it go so terribly for other people. So I will always manage my own social media and things like that. And, you know, just how I respond to people. And I think people appreciate the fact that you're responsive, you know, and that you're interactive.
I think that, you know, yeah, those people will appreciate it. Well, you have far more followers than I do, so you probably have turned that setting off, but I still have it set to notify me when somebody's talking to me because I don't want somebody to get it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I haven't turned off anything. You can message the show on Facebook. You can DM me if you want to. I mean, there's so many avenues that you can contact me. You know, it's kind of ridiculous, but yeah, I don't mind interacting with fans or anything like that. I hate saying fans, with listeners, really. It makes me feel cringy with saying fans because they're like, oh, you're fans. I'm like, oh, no, they're listeners. And it's so funny. I think it's hilarious. Like, I am confident in my abilities as a podcaster, right? But whenever I get a listener who's like, oh my God, I love your show. I love this. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most uncomfortable thing. Please don't tell me how much you like this. I get so uncomfortable with it. They're like, oh, you really did a good job here. And it's like, I can't accept praise like that. I'm just like, oh God, don't tell me to my face. Please stay away from me with that.
You know, sometimes when I get sort of in that mindset, because I don't know why, but I'm sort of hot and cold about that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, you know, thanks so much. And then other times I'm like, oh my gosh, stop it. Knock it off. But so, you know, sometimes I like to just think to myself, well, people can hate listen. Mm-hmm. You know, like they can just hate listen. And how would I feel about that?
Right. I've known people to do that. And I'm like, you know what? It's still a download. So go ahead. Hate listen all you want to.
There's 1 or 2 podcasts that I listen to currently that I hate listen to.
There you go. You give them the money.
I am, but also it gives me things to talk about with some of my other friends who also happen to hate listen
them.
To the same show. Yeah. So, you know, you mentioned people can find you in a multitude of ways. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm typically on my Twitter for True Crime Fan Club, so it's at TCFC Pod. But you can also contact me, I think, on my voiceover one, which is Lanie_VO. So that's kind of my personal-ish one, which is not podcast related. It's just kind of my individual profile. But I generally interact the most on TCFC Pod's Twitter.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Now, in doing my research, I did come across Lanie the VO, and the VO artist, and I was like, surely that's a different Lanie.
It's me.
Turns out it's not. How did you get into VO work?
It started when I was helping another show called the Dirty Bits podcast. And I was looking kind of for history shows at the time. And I found the Dirty Bits and I reached out to them and I said, hey, I really want to, help your show out. If you don't, have a lot of downloads or anything like that, send me your promo and I would love to play it on my show. I love history. And so the host, Tawny, is a professional voiceover artist and we kind of connected. We clicked really well. And I was like, tell me more about this VO thing that you do. I think that's so cool. And she was like, your voice would be great for it. Here's my coach's information. Here's what I did. And so she kind of really helped set that off for me because I had no idea, about the voiceover world and the coaching that you need and, all those things like that. So I'd really been coaching for the last year and a half with her and with my other coach, Terry. And I finally produced my demo and they were like, here, little baby demo, go out into the world and, start shopping it around and things like that. So it's been a really good learning curve of how to start over or how to start VO because a lot of the things that people fall into with the pitfalls is like, you have a really great voice and you're like, cool, I can do this now. And it takes a lot of work. Like it's insane the amount of work I had to do to even get ready for just one demo. And, I have a couple more that I need to work on to, really update my portfolio. But yeah, it's really because of Tawny, who she got me into it. And thankfully, I've had some success with it. So I just got to keep building that side of the business for myself.
Well, I think that's really cool. And did you have to get an agent for that?
No, you don't need an agent. It helps, I guess, for getting, auditions and things like that. But there are a bunch of places that you can go to audition for different things. But, direct marketing and networking are pretty much the biggest ways that you're going to find clients and things like that that'll keep coming back.
Direct marketing?
Mm-hmm. Mostly through email, not like mail.
I was like, you mean those weird Valpak coupon things?
Right? Need a voiceover talent? No. No, it's more like email, things like that.
I could talk to you forever about that. So where can everybody find all of these podcasts?
Oh, geez. So they're on all of the podcast platforms that you can find in the world. So on Apple Podcasts, just True Crime Fan Club podcast. It's Haunted What Now? Crimes of Passion. That's all you have to do. Just Google it. Spotify, it's on there. iHeartRadio, wherever.
Anchor or Spreaker or anybody like that?
I'm with Spreaker.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. They're fun.
So I guess they also have an app, right? The Spreaker app or something?
Spreaker, yeah. Literally anywhere. And Himalaya.
What's Himalaya? Never heard of. Man, they're everywhere.
Yeah, it's like another podcast app. Kind of like Patreon, honestly. It's like your listeners can tip you if like they can't contribute monthly or anything. They can go and tip you like maybe $5 or $10 or, $2, whatever. And it just builds a bank for you kind of thing, for your listeners to support you. So I decided to give that platform a try too, just to see kind of how it is. It's been nice. It's not anything like Patreon in terms of the growth, but it's a newer platform and it's a lot more, I think, open for listeners who can't really contribute monthly to help you out if they want to.
Right. So are you on Patreon?
I am. Mm-hmm.
And what made you decide to give Patreon a shot?
When I was a baby podcaster, my dream was that I would never have ads on any of my shows and I would just fully support myself on
you're so
Patreon
cute.
donations because I figured obviously nobody wants to hear ads and they don't want to hear ads enough to, pay for it on the show basically. So that bubble was quickly popped when I talked to other veteran podcasters who are like, no. So I started Patreon kind of early on. I don't even know when I started it. But yeah, I've had consistent listenership on there. It's not anything that, it's helpful in terms of the monetary donations and everything, but I think I give a lot more content on there too. So on Himalaya Plus and on Patreon, they get ad-free episodes, bonus episodes that aren't on the regular feed. And then I have a completely different series on there called TCFC Prime, which is just like listener selected topics. So if you're like, hey, I want you to do an episode on, Ed Gein, like I wouldn't cover that on my regular podcast feed because he's been, done. And there's so many episodes about him on so many other platforms, but sometimes people just want to hear how you're going to do the show or do the episode. So it's completely listener based. And so I release that every month. And then on November 1st, I'm going to be releasing a mini series on TCFC's regular feed called The Letters. So yeah, I was just like, wow, I'm doing a lot. I give a lot of content basically.
Clearly.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily see the return on that in terms of like the ROI, but I don't really do it for that. I think if I was in it for the money, I wouldn't release as much content as I'm doing. I just kind of have all of these ideas in my head. I'm like, here, hopefully you guys like it.
Yes. Well, I think that if it's all about the money, then the actual product suffers, and you can tell. So good job.
Thank you.
Sounds like you're doing it for the right reasons. Lanie, before I let you go, is there anything that I didn't ask you or we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, the Texas Podcast Union.
What's this?
So the Texas Podcast Union is something that I created sometime last year. I don't remember. It's basically a collective of different Texas podcasters all over Texas that kind of get together every so often to host meetups for their listeners and to basically network and meet with each other. I really wanted to create a community here in Texas for different podcasters to meet and mingle because I didn't really see that. I was always traveling somewhere else to go meet up with my friends and things like that. And I was like, I kind of want that community here. And I know that there's podcasters, here. If I'm doing it, there has to be somebody else here. And I found that there was, and it's been going ever since. We've been really successful in being able to go to different places throughout the state. Next year, we're kind of going to expand a little bit to, I think, West Texas and hang out there for a little bit. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And you've come to them, so you can say if it's been fun or not.
It is. And, on social media, you get to interact with so many people that you never see face to face. And I was invited into this Texas Podcast Union. I just call it TexPod U.
Yeah.
I was invited into this TexPod U, and, so I've been interacting with some of the people in it for, months and months or whatever.
Right.
But it was really cool to finally get to meet some of those people face to face and interact with them because people interact differently on social media. And so.
Yeah, I agree.
It was just nice to actually be face to face and meet these people, yourself included. Yeah,
everybody's cool. I think we have a really great group and we keep adding people. So hopefully like next year we'll be able to meet more and as new people come up. And I especially kind of want to do it for newer shows that are starting that may not, know what to do. And they can really kind of ask those questions of different people, especially we have a bunch of different types of shows in that group that don't do the same thing. So I think it's really great networking and cross promotion opportunities that are there when we're able to retweet each other's shows or do something like this where we're collaborating together.
I agree. And it's also, like you said, people have questions and get answers and give answers. And it's very friendly. It's very, back and forth. And there's sort of a whatever you need vibe. Yeah,
it has to be. I am a big proponent of that. Like, I don't tolerate that type of stuff. So if you get an attitude or you're not friendly, get out of here.
Nice.
Yeah, I just mean if you're just not, you can tell, if somebody's just kind of a douche or whatever, then you're not really kind of after the community feel that I am. So I don't want you in it. So you got to go.
Well, I mean, that makes 100% sense because whether you built this thing or not, and in this case you did, but people like to work with people they like.
Right. Yeah. And I like everybody.
Oh. But, I mean, to your point about, if you're a dick, you're out of here.
Yeah.
Life's too short.
Yeah. And we've done that. I mean, we've had to do that because it's just created such a, an icky feeling and stuff like that in the group. And I hate things like that. So, I put on my HR hat and I'm just like, hey, listen, you got to go. Sorry about it. But that's just not the atmosphere, the type of community that I'm trying to build. And it is what it is. And, I wish you luck, but you're just not going to be a good fit for us, in terms of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. I think everybody has the same mindset of wanting to grow, wanting to collaborate and wanting to support each other versus you're my competition. Because if you see each other as competition, then you're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. There's enough earballs to go around.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's so many different types of podcasts just in the TextPod U. There's plenty for everybody to listen to.
For sure.
Everything is not for everybody, and some things are for more people than others. But, like you said, there's room. There shouldn't be any infighting. There's no competition. We're all friends here.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right. Well, Lanie H.
That's me.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your, oh my God, crazy busy schedule to let us all get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Lanie, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate it, and I want you to have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks for listening, Streetwalkers. And don't forget, follow the show on Twitter at FascinationSTPD, on Instagram at Fascination Street Pod. Follow the podcast page on Facebook at Fascination Street Podcast. And of course, you can always email me at fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and rate us on iTunes. For the next 3 months, everybody who rates and reviews the show and sends a screenshot to fascinationstreetpod@gmail.com will get a free surprise gift mailed to them. Every single one of you. So do it. Thanks, Streetwalkers. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.